You're listening to the Zen Cop Podcast.
Guys, thanks for being here at Mac Rollins Zen Cop Podcast. Thank you for listening and thank you for all the support. This is episode 14 of season 2. Appreciate you guys listening. I've had a lot of fun conversations and just really neat storytelling and story sharing over the past couple of months with a lot of new people. So I appreciate everyone's time. And if you are listening, thank you so much. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. It does make a difference and it does help me gain a larger audience and expand this platform further. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about verbiage, not the Sonia Massey incident that occurred, I believe it was early July. There's enough of that being dissected and torn apart online. Go nuts, YouTube videos, whatever it is you're going to watch, go for it. I encourage you to do so. And I like to capitalize on training when we can. And more importantly, training that is going to have some sort of lasting impact, right? Some things will change, technology will change, things will change, but for the basis and a lot of the, I guess, quote unquote tactics that I will talk about on here, you can go find 1,000 different, YouTube videos on high port versus low port. This is just an example I'm throwing out. You can go online and find an infinite supply of reasons to do either one. There's not enough information out there, in my opinion, when it comes to some of the more simpler things that we do way more than what would involve a gun. Oddly enough, the two do go hand in hand, and verbiage is the topic of conversation today. And oddly enough, I had started writing this actually a couple months ago and didn't really finish it, didn't have anywhere to plug it in. But with the recent events in early July with Miss Massey, I do feel like it does hold a lot of relevance, and the key words and things that we use during those moments of force or escalation do have a very long-lasting impact on the individual, on the potential injured party or deceased party, and also the public and society. There's a lot of things that move around with that. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about before we get into the verbiage is more so how the human brain works in that scenario. So if you've been there, great. If you haven't, and you're in this line of work, I'll touch on this again, but you're going to experience this eventually. So for purposes of what we're going to talk about today, try to imagine yourself, post-critical incident in the immediate aftermath, right? Seconds following the incident itself. It's over, your feet are on the ground, you're standing. That's good. Looks like you survived, and your nose is inhaling massive amounts of air because you activated your parasympathetic nervous system and you didn't even know it, right? The human body is a lot more capable than we think, especially under stress. So a few minutes prior to that, however, your brain made the conscious decision to move everything non-essential to your survival off the table. It also gave the order to dump massive amounts of adrenaline into your bloodstream, which increased your heart rate and also your blood pressure. And at the same time, the adrenaline triggered the release of glucose and fats from storage within the body. And those fats provide energy for the body because snacks are important for your body when you're trying not to die. And within those same seconds, your brain also decided to start pumping more blood into all of your vital organs to get things moving, because safety is no accident. So your breathing started to become more rapid and shallow, and the small airways in your lungs opened up to allow more oxygen for your brain to function even faster and even sharper. And all at the same time, your sense of smell, hearing, and your overall alertness, that just tripled in efficiency. And your pupils even dilated to allow more light in, which improves your vision. All of this happening in a matter of seconds, and all this happening because your brain wants you to be successful and essentially to keep you alive. And then just as quickly as it started, once we're safe, the brain slowly starts to turn off the burners and resume to a neutral state, semi-heightened, right? But still very neutral. And try to imagine the sound of a very large jet, right? Turning off its engines, the slow sound of chaos reducing to a dull murmur while your ears ring and your mind wanders. Now, many of us can relate to that feeling, as it has probably happened to us many times throughout our careers. And if you're listening to this and you've never been there yourself, I assure you, if you're doing this job the right way, it's not a matter of if you get to survive someday, it's a matter of when you get to survive someday. And the most important thing to remember in that realm of survival is that we don't get to choose the moment will choose us. So now that we have an idea of how the body works under stress, let's take a wide lensed look as to how we got there to begin with, right? Literally, yes, we got there physically. There was a reason, a crime occurring, maybe something we saw in real time, right? But when it comes to the incident itself and how we react, speak, or even how we look during that incident, that is something that gets dissected after the fact and may even play a role for how things proceed for you in the future. So I guess try to look at it as if the incident itself, right? Those few critical seconds that will be played on the news over and over again, that's sort of like the trailer version of what happened. And in order for us to understand the incident overall, society will need to watch the entire movie. Now, it's important to remember that the majority of society will never actually watch the entire movie. However, there may be a certain portion of society that will eventually watch the entire movie and in an official capacity. And that capacity will more than likely have the name juror attached to it and will probably consist of 12 very important people. Now, this begs the question, why is a wide lens so important when it comes to a critical incident and understanding how the human brain works under stress? If I had to put it into a sentence, I would say that it gives us the opportunity to show that we are human. Empathy and understanding are absolutely paramount when it comes to any sort of justification for any type of force, especially deadly. And some parts of society may see that as some sort of cushion or a safety net that softens the actions of the cops. And it's actually quite the opposite. It gives good investigators and good administrators the opportunity to find the truth, not premature fault or guilt. And the expectation, sadly, of most of society, however, is to find guilt and quite quickly. And in order to combat those expectations, any good agency will be transparent and offer as much information as they can with respect to the investigation and the parties involved. Now, regardless, the demands from the majority of society will never be met, no matter what we do or how fast we do it. And sadly, you could do everything right, and you'll still get a head of lettuce thrown at you as you leave. This job is never going to make everyone happy, and it's important to understand that before we go further on this topic. So when it comes to the actions before, during, and after the incident, that is where we start to see good training and good education pay off, or the opposite, where we sort of cringe at the action or non-action of those involved. And we've all seen horrific videos of cops making mistakes. We've seen them because the media and a variety of outreach groups will make sure that we do, along with every other member of society. Now, the frustrating part is that for every one video of a cop making a mistake, there are thousands of videos of cops doing it right. But as cops, we get to be put on trial in the court of public opinion, and that court does not believe in due process. Now, on the topic of actions or non-actions, they can and will absolutely dictate the outcome of any type of future legal proceeding, both criminal and civil. A lot of assumption and stock goes into the facts of the case and the evidence overall. And while that may be a very large part of your case, it's not the only thing that gets presented to a jury of your peers. Now, going back to the concept of what I refer to as the human element, and that element is definitely a two-way street when it comes to jury trial, it's important to understand that we are the ones who initially get to set the tone, the tempo, and the overall response to the scenario at hand, right? Control is a word that is not used enough when it comes to the escalation or de-escalation of a wide range of scenarios and circumstances. And as we've seen time and time again, again, once we lose that control, we lose a lot. And the final outcome usually goes from bad to worse to absolutely terrible. It's the finite details within actions of violence that can change the perspective of the general public, specifically a jury. And sometimes it's not only what you say or do, but it's also how you say it and how you do it that really matters. And that can be dialogue, tone, inflection, profanity, and even your own body language that will get put under a microscope for everyone, not only to look at, but to study intently and eventually develop their own opinions on, and in some cases, opinions based on something that was taken completely out of context. Now, it's important to remember that you will get seconds, if not nanoseconds, to make a decision under stress with limited options. And the defense attorneys and their team, they will have days, weeks, months, or maybe even years to tear it apart piece by piece to make you look like a monster and their client essentially a saint. Now, the defense is going to do their job, and if they're the right attorney being paid the right amount of money, they're probably going to do their job pretty well. And that job is to either disprove your evidence, discredit your integrity, or dismiss your behavior as unethical, immoral, or both. Now, sometimes they pick one to focus on, but it's usually a combination of all three, coupled with whatever else they can do to instill doubt. And doubt is a very powerful word in the realm of court proceedings and ultimately in the realm of the jury making a decision. Doubt can be created through a variety of ways, but one of the most common is through the human connection or lack thereof. You can throw the kitchen sink at the jury when it comes to evidence, but it still won't change the fact that you sounded like an asshole on the video. And in some scenarios, your words and attitude appeared to have escalated the scenario itself into what ultimately became a scenario that could have been avoided entirely. Now, a lot of cops will make the argument that their words or actions on camera or audio recording won't change anything. I promise you, those same cops will be the ones crying in court, begging God himself for a time machine once the rubber meets the road. And you can read the jury instructions on some of the most common charges for cops as of late, and you'll see it's not rocket science, right, to put the pieces together. And we've been watching a lot of cops get prosecuted post 2020. What's important to remember in that regard is that the jury instructions haven't changed. Society has. The human element has never been more powerful for this generation of law enforcement than it is today. In this world of just, I would call, total and complete violence and chaos that we have to navigate daily, we need to create a baseline that keeps us safe, that keeps society safe, and that operates within the letter of the law and also agency policy. The majority of society, unfortunately, will never understand that violence is a very effective form of de-escalation, and when implemented properly, it will in fact save lives. The problem, however, is that society and the mainstream media have a very different expectation when said violence does or does not get to be used. And suddenly, a lot of those guys and gals are subject matter experts in a variety of fields, and believe me, they will let the entire world know exactly what you did wrong and never what you did right. That happens all too often. Now, as much as we don't care or put much stock into what people think, it does matter for us in the long run, especially if that long run ends up coming after your retirement or even worse, your freedom. And as cops, we really have to understand that in any scenario we enter, regardless of origin or even the actions of the bad guy to begin with, we will already be at a disadvantage even before we arrive because of what happened in 2020. The groundwork was laid during that time, and now we are simply walking on it. It's important to walk with a purpose, do your job, but understand that every single thing we do or say or don't say will be recorded in HD 4K with THX quality surround sound, and it will already be circulating on social media before you're back at the office for your interview. The things that I want the listener to take away from today's episode is literally this. Everything that we say or don't do will have either catastrophic or positive results for us down the road. Verbiage is everything. And there's a lot of education. There's a lot of, class, all these things we can do on the tactics side of the house. But the application of those tactics does require you to speak, right? And how you say things, how you ask for things, how you demand things, all of that stuff can change and be fluid from one individual to the next, right? I've heard tons of arguments for the verbiage, right? Show me your hands. Or if we think they have a gun in their pocket in their hand, is that the right thing to say, right? Think outside the box and understand that each scenario is going to dictate a different response. But the things that we say and sometimes how we say them, even if in our mind at the time it sounds like the right thing, right? It's like hearing your voice on a recording, or if you ever listen back to your interviews and maybe you just said something where you kind of go, that didn't sound right, or that came out wrong, or wow, I really sound like a prick right now. Those are things that we can learn from. And I encourage anyone who ever does do audio, video, all those things, play it back, listen to yourself, see how you sound. Imagine a scenario where you have a limited amount of thought because of the stress and the environment and all these other factors that are going to escalate, right? It's kind of that running rule that we've all been taught since we were younger, right? If you're the one that's losing your mind, if you're the one that's screaming, you've lost control, right? The person who sits there while the other person yells at them, which one looks like they're in control? Well, the person who's calm. That can be said for a variety of things. The issue of profanity comes up frequently. I have a potty mouth. That's just me. I try really hard to not have a potty mouth, even in the most neutral of circumstances. I've been a part of some pretty serious interviews, and maybe, I slip in a couple of bad words, and later on listening to it, I kind of went, maybe I was trying to, I don't know what my objective was, but it doesn't sound good after the fact. So imagine that though, in a scenario now where it's not an interview, you're essentially about to use lethal force, you're about to use some type of force, but ultimately, a scenario where, the bad guy ends up dead or hurt or whatever the case may be. And, we only have so much control in those scenarios. And when we lose control entirely, that's when things get really bad. And you can lose control very quickly with absolutes. You can lose control with saying things in a certain way. I've seen a lot of cops draw lines in the sand, and I know where their head was at. But if you draw a line in the sand for some of these people, especially people who are dealing with mental health issues, or kind of pick your poison for their mindset, they may actually, in turn, intentionally cross that proverbial line, right? If you give them something, they're probably going to have a reaction to it. But even in those scenarios, if you do have to give the ultimatum, or you have to draw a line in the sand, there's a right way to do it so that if the line does get crossed, you're not the bad guy. The same could be said for a variety of other scenarios and circumstances. And we could talk about that all day long. My objective with this was to not dive into specifics, because that would create a much longer podcast, and I really don't have the time for it. If you do, great, do your own research. But point being, in this game of life, and specifically in this job, specific to law enforcement, we are going to lose no matter what. We just are. That's not being pessimistic. That's a reality. We never win. And even if we do, we still pay people lots of money at the end of the day. Even when the action was completely justified, they still win. That's not going to go away ever. So in a game where you're going to lose no matter what, it would be wise to give yourself enough balance and stability within all that chaos to simply become an afterthought of a critical incident that happened on this day that everyone just sort of forgets about, versus becoming case law or a booking sheet. So guys, thanks for listening. Got lots of stuff coming down the pipe. Some really cool guests coming up. It's just a matter of me scheduling it. I'm also going to be a guest on a couple of shows soon. Again, I keep saying this stuff, but it's just a matter of work life for me right now, which is pretty hectic, family life, which is always hectic, and then just this. So again, I enjoy doing this stuff, and I'm looking forward to the future and just kind of giving you guys some quality content and just basically stuff to chew on. When I'm on the show, I try to keep it under a half hour and objectively just throw out information for you guys to not only absorb, but to think about. I really don't believe in wasting time and just sort of talking about things that are, either saturated when it comes to the tactics side of the house, or just saturated in general. So if there are topics or things you guys would like to talk about, by all means, DM me or email me. I've gotten lots of things from people over the past couple of years, and it's always just created dialogue and food for thought, which is how we see progress for the future. So guys, again, thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to drop a rating, like and subscribe, or comment, depending on what platform you're listening to. Again, thank you guys so much. A lot of good stuff coming down the pipe, and I'm looking forward to it. So again, thank you so much. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good week. Be safe.